So welcome everyone. Thanks for your time today. The topic for the webinar today is, well, it's around ESG, but primarily we're asking the question, is the GCC going green? And what does that look like, and what impact and benefits is that going to have? So, I mean, we know from global climate mandates that they've been a catalyst for change in other regions. We know that politicians, investors, stakeholders, and regulators are drivers in this sort of green pressure, pushing regional entities to embrace sustainable business models, whether that be from a risk perspective or whether that be from a regulatory perspective. And we know that institutions in the Middle East are increasingly signaling that monetary policy and banking will be used to fight climate change. And we understand this to be a seismic change, and a change that you will need to anticipate and need support in. So today's session is primarily a knowledge sharing session to explain to you our view of ESG, how we've implemented and some of the benefits that have come in other regions, and how that can relate to the GCC as a region. We're lucky enough today to have two speakers. We have Terence C, who's an Associate Professor of Finance at the ESCP Business School and Holt International Business School. Terence provides advice, commentary, and his viewpoint to important media outlets globally, to the EU when they need advice. Terence has also delivered speeches to the United Nations and to the International Monetary Fund, and we're pleased to have him here today. But before Terence, we have Farhan Khan. Farhan is an associate partner at Strategic Gears. He has over 25 years of global consultancy experience, where he's focused on driving that strategic change and transformation in large organizations, including in government entities and Saudi government entities. In addition, Farhan provides support, so has a breadth of knowledge on SMEs and startups, and provides his support across GCC to provide that advice on how startups can achieve market expansion and how they can navigate that growth. So again, thanks everyone for your time. I'll hand over to Farhan now for his presentation on his view from the market of ESG in GCC, the benefits that it will have, and what regulations are coming. Thank you, Farhan.
Thank you. Do you see my screen?
Not yet. Yes, coming. Yeah, thank you.
Let me just. Yes, here we go. So I'll thank you, Lawrence, for the introduction. So I'll start by introducing Strategic Gears also, just 2 minutes, and then we'll jump to ESG. So Strategic Gears, not many people in the call may know, it's one of the largest local consulting company in Saudi Arabia, almost 10 years in Saudi, 250 employees. We have completed almost 200 plus projects, worked with 160 clients, and we do good work. And that's the reason we were last year and year before, we were platinumly rated as a top consulting firm in management, education, government, not-for-profit, oil and gas, and overall public sector. And we had a diamond rating in as a top consulting firm in art and culture. Now, that's us where I am coming from. But the idea is we walk the corridors. And when we walk the corridors, we notice that ESG is gaining traction. Now, I'll take a step back. Let's start very big picture. ESG, it's environment, social, and governance. So environment is all about your carbon footprint, waste management, energy efficiency. Social is all about how an entity is managing relationship with employees, supplier, customers, as well as community on a whole. And governance is all about transparencies and internal control. Now, when this happens, you're reporting ESG or you are monitoring ESG, outsiders look at you as you are a good corporate citizen. And when you are a good corporate citizen, you get preferential treatment. And that preferential treatment is mostly on capital and investment. People believe that you have, as an entity, have a less chance of reputational damage. And the new generation wants to work with ethical and sustainable companies. So the talent acquisition is coming towards you, as well as the new generation wants to buy from ethical and sustainable companies. So even sales are coming towards you, which essentially means you are more resilient. And when an investor see a more resilient company, they want to invest. So that is at a very high level. But if we go deeper into Middle East, and I will zoom a bit more into Saudi Arabia, 87% of the companies on Tadawul are reporting on ESG. There are three types of reporting on ESG. One is a very basic, you talk about this is what we are doing on E, S, and G, and then there is an integrated report. Not many are integrating, but 87 are at least giving some hints on what their actions are on ESG. To give some actions, you have to monitor. And Terence will talk more about monitoring, but over the last year, 121 billion were spent on either monitoring or reporting, etc. And we believe that this will grow by 20% for the next 5 years. Essentially, it will double. This 120 billion will be 240 billion by 2030. Why would that happen? Why is this happening? Because one, people want to be good corporate citizen, but also the regulatory framework or regulatory ecosystem within Saudi Arabia is also hinting and nudging towards ESG reporting. So Ministry of Economy and Planning is setting up guidelines. SAMA is promoting ESG. Tadawul is, as we said, is nudging. CMA, Capital Market Authority, is putting in governances around board duties as well as social responsible investment and public investment fund. Almost $1 trillion real fund in a dollar fund. Sorry, in Saudi Arabia, they are looking at initiatives and their subsidiaries through ESG lens. So there is a lot of energy around ESG. That energy is being translated into some regulations update. Now I have, CMA, we talked about, they are implementing some disclosure standards. ESG integration within your reporting is being embedded and is being, essentially nudged, if I may, from sovereign wealth funds as well as the National Development Fund. GCC-wide corporation is happening, and mandatory financial disclosure around ESG are coming into play. And we believe, as we look at the future, we believe that there will be, within the next 2-3 years, it will be mandatory that if you are going to public markets, you should have ESG disclosure. Currently, it is please do it, but we believe in the next 2-3 years, it will be forced. Now, why is all of this happening? Something that I mentioned previously, money goes where it is treated the best and where it multiplies. So sustainable finance, so you would have heard of green bonds, etc. When those green bonds are issued, they are not spent on any other company. It is what Lawrence mentioned. Green companies get that money if that investment comes in. Sovereign wealth fund, we talked about PIF, but if you go to Qatar as well as UAE and Abu Dhabi, you will also notice that they have ESG focused investment. So money is going towards that, as well as investor sentiments. If the government is doing it, other investors start doing that too. So institutional investors are also nudging and pushing towards ESG investment. And when that happens, money is held by the financial institution. They also start focusing onto that, and they are also prioritizing that money and investment goes towards that. So that's at a very high level. I will just summarize it in a bit. Lawrence started by saying, hey, there is Vision 2030. That Vision 2030 has 3 pillars, which is all about vibrant society, thriving economy, and ambitious nation. And within that, there are a lot of bullet point or initiatives around social responsibility, transparency, and accountability. All of those are for the government as well as for the private sector and an individual. And when you come to the private sector, if they are looking for investment, they will currently voluntarily, but in future mandated to monitor as well report ESG. So that's in short where we are. I will give the mic to Terence now, and he can talk more about how AI can help us do these things. Terence, over to you.
Thank you very, very much, Farhan. Thank you. Lawrence, would you want to add anything before I monopolize the webinar? All right,
No, Terence, you have the mic, you go ahead.
Very good. So thank you very, very much, Farhan, for the great introduction. Thank you, Lawrence. Thank you very much for coming in today. So I am coming in from a slightly different perspective, but as Farhan was saying, what I really want to what I'm really excited to talk about is basically how AI can solve the problems, but the question here is this: what exactly is the problem here? Let me tell you a story, because stories actually tells us a lot of things. So first, there is a company in the UK. That's where I live. That's where Lawrence lives as well. There's a company called Boohoo, all right, which is a fairly successful business selling fast retailing at very, very reasonable price. I think most of the stuff they're actually selling are actually online. A very, very successful business. And the reputation is not just on the financial success. It is also on the fact that, according to probably one of the most reputable ESG rating companies out there, that is the MSCI, it actually has got the second highest rating, right? And then on the supply chain labor standard, they also get a second highest rating from another company. As a matter of fact, with 9 other rating companies, are altogether about 19,000 companies, they actually rank in the top 25% when it comes to ESG ratings. So all in all, it is a company that is seen as a very, very reputable when it comes to following ESG compliance and doing not just doing well, but it's just also doing good. Until one day, one of the newspapers here did a very, very in-depth investigation and try to actually figure out if this is the case. And as it turned out, what the newspaper found out was that, one, they were so this company, the way they do it is outsource all the all the manufacturing to the different smaller workshops in the UK. And as it turned out, these workshops are paying way under the minimum wages that is required, to go to the labor. So people are underpaid. Working hours, very, very long. And on top of that, during COVID time, they were, the workshops keep on working, but yet these workshops were not providing or unwilling to provide any of the equipments against COVID, during that time. So the question here is this: how is it possible that on the one hand it enjoys such a great rating, and then on the other hand it actually if you look under the hood, how is it possible that there are so many problems, right? So many violations against the law. So all good people in academia, I would have to actually write something on the board, and I do apologize in advance if it come across looking like a lecture, but I promise you it will not be as boring as my usual lectures. So what actually happened? The short answer was this: what actually happened was one problem that has always been there, that could not be solved, in my humble opinion, before AI. And that, of course, is what we people call information. If only I can spell, that would be nice. Asymmetry, which means that basically the two parties, they have not got the right information. Let's take a look how it works. All right. So we have got the rating companies, which I will call the raters. And I will also call the rated companies, which are the companies that are like, getting the ESG ratings. Now, what exactly are the raters like, suffering from? What problems they are, right? First problem they were actually suffering was this. As it turned out, different raters have got very different definitions of like ESG. And let's face it, right? Probably I don't know about you, maybe it's my small brain that is like that is working or not working. I can understand what the E stands for, environmental. I can understand sort of what the social stands for, the S, but I struggle often as to what exactly is governance. Now, the biggest problem we have, like I have seen, is that to me, governance could be, could be one thing, but for another company, for another person, it will be something very, very different. And this is something that I have seen in so many different financial services here in the UK. Just to give you an idea, one bank that I spoke with, I believe that in order to fulfill their internally decided ESG rate definitions, there are about 20 questions to answer. Whereas a fund management company that I also spoke with, they have got about 400. As you could see, there is a huge gap between what exactly constitutes as ESG. Now, we're thankfully, we are not in a definition business, but as you could see, what exactly is ESG is already causing trouble as as it is. All right. So what's the second problem? The second problem is this. As people say, if you don't know what you are measuring, it is very, very difficult to actually know what you are measuring, right? So the measurements is very, very difficult. Simply because even if you know what climate is, right? Climate change is. I think we can all say we will have some idea. Or going green, right? Or what does it mean? Does it mean like a CO2? Does it mean what does it actually mean? It's very, very difficult to actually measure. On top of that, one of the most as it turned out in the UK, there was a study done about 2-3 years ago. Basically, the financial services as on the whole in the UK, if we were to add together, the money they actually lend out to the different companies, as it turned out, the pollution, which is what people call the financial pollution, the pollution these companies, these borrowers actually created, they actually generate more pollution than Canada as a country as a whole. So we basically, just the financial services of the UK is already the 8th largest country in the world in terms of pollution, right? So the problem, of course, is this, how do you actually measure what the borrowers, what does it constitute, right? When it comes to, all types of pollutions, right? And then, of course, there is the weighting. In a sense that, hey, what do you actually every single good equations that should add up to 100%. But what do you actually put? How much weight do you actually put on one thing? Now, again, different companies do things very, very differently. Now, the problem here is this: what is so what's the big deal, right? Of course, the big deal here is there is no standardized way. If you think about it, if there are no standardized way to do things, which that would mean it is very, very difficult to actually collect information, right? Because everyone has got very, very different different meanings, right? So no standardized ways. Okay, now let's take a look at very quickly at what are the how does it how do the current raters actually do it? As it turned out, what happened was this. The reasons why the company I was mentioning earlier, the Boohoo, they were able to actually do everything above or under the radar, depending on how you actually interpret it, is simply because, as it turned out, the raters, the way they actually get the information is all purely from self-reporting. In short, whatever the rated companies provide to the raters will simply take them wholesale. Now, like, at first glance, this doesn't make any sense, because this is exactly what happened during the financial crisis of 2008, self-certification. The thing here is this, though, for the raters, this is about the only way they can collect some in-depth information about the rated companies. And as you could see, when there is, when a company can report information, there will be it is very it is very easy, all right, or it is very there is lots of incentive to oversee certain things, right? So basically, I think it's selection of information to be handed towards over to the raters, right? Now, and another problem, even though the rated companies are doing it without any hiding anything. Another problem, as it turned out, the raters the rated companies were actually facing was the following. If we have got no idea what the definitions are, that the measurements are, and on top of that, different raters are using different ways to measure things. If you are a rated company, how do you actually improve your own ratings, right? What do you do? If the weight assigned to different things are different, what exactly do you do? Now, what's the big deal here? As Farhan actually said that, like I mentioned earlier, one thing that is truly important is the fact that this matters a lot to the investors. And one thing that I want to really add to what Farhan was saying, last year I was sitting in a seminar, run by the London Stock Exchange Group, and as it turned out, LSEG these days, they decided to diversify their portfolio and actually does much less on the equity on the stock exchange side. Instead, they actually focused on helping companies to issue green bonds. So I raised my question, I asked, hand and asked, what are the reasons that companies want to actually issue green bonds? And the short answer is, of course, what Farhan was saying, there's reputational gain. There are there is also a show of commitment to to ESG. But just as important from the financial perspective, and me being a finance professor, just as important is the following. It actually allows them to lower the cost of capital. As it turned out, green bonds are often a little bit cheaper, and therefore, the cost of running your any companies is also cheaper, as in that sense. From a purely financial perspective, that will actually make all your investments worth more, just like that. Okay, so to investors, it's very, very they are interested, and it's a to a large extent, it is a supply and demand thing. Simply because if there are more investors more interested in supplying money funding to companies that are pursuing ESG, as you can imagine, it will actually push down the cost of the return that they need, right? So anyhow, so no standard way so for the investors, the biggest problem is this: how do they compare? I have got I run a fund, right? A green fund. Here's a question: if the rating companies are all actually looking at things differently, how do I actually know which companies to invest in, right? It is a hard one. Now, on the other side, the investors is the problem is, can we even trust the information provided, right? Because a lot of the information will be actually be locked into the locked into it. Now, on top of that, on top of that, this is not a one-off assignment. This has to be done on an ongoing basis, which means that there is a cost, and that's what Farhan was saying. The cost of monitoring is can be rather high, right? It is not a capex. There are there are opex as well. So it is very, very difficult to actually solve this information asymmetry problem on an ongoing basis economically, right? However, I believe all of this can actually be solved with the use of AI, right? How does it help? How does AI help? Well, I think AI can actually help in 3 ways, okay? So first, I believe that AI can actually be really good at collecting data, right? Data collections. This is what so early 2 years ago, a year ago, I can't remember anymore. So I actually wrote a paper on basically the fact that how AI can actually help with the data collection part is what I called search, screen, and structure. All right. Usually the example I use is the following. So let's say you lend money to a company, right? Or provide the financial financial backings to a company as an investor, right? Here's a problem. The company, let's say, is in Vietnam, and the problem is that this company in Vietnam, they polluted the local river, right? Now the problem is it was actually reported, but it was reported on the local news. It was reported on the local news in Vietnamese. As the investor, right, it's very, very difficult to keep track of all the news out there in the world in different languages. So I believe that with AI plus what people call the web scrapers, AI can easily actually go and screen a search for all the news every single day, right? Every single moment, and actually bring all the information together, right? To look for them. And then just as important, I think with today's Gen AI, so ChatGPT, it is very easy to actually turn human language into something that machines can actually understand. And here is the key. It is not the fact that the machines can actually go through the human text in order to extract the most information, screen. Just as important is the fact that it can actually take the information and turn it into structured information that can sit on the database. So turning unstructured data into structured data. So I believe that that is a very, very crucial thing that AI can actually do. However, so far what we have still talk about is how the data is collected. We still have not actually talked about our biggest problem, and that of course is definitions. How do we do it? How do we do it when if there's a company that is got 20 definitions on ESG, and then there is another one has got 400? How do we do it? And this is where AI can also be very, very helpful, and that is the processing bit. And that is this. So if any companies, either regardless of whether you have got 20 questions or 400 questions, what I think AI can really do, especially with these days when Gen AI is getting cheaper and cheaper, it is much easier to actually fit the collected data, right? That is going in the structured data, and fit it into answering the 20 and the 400 questions. Now, think about it. Here is if I were to give you a set of data, and then I say, please actually cut through all the data and answer these 20 questions. This will be an exam, right? 20 questions is a full, is like a 5 hours exam. 400 questions is an impossible task. AI can do it easily. What is important is the fact that AI can actually understand, Gen AI can actually understand, in quotation mark at least, understand what exactly are the questions asking, and therefore basically take the information data and put it into the answering the questions. So I believe that when it comes to the processing bit, it is it is important. Now, another another problem that we have seen here is the fact that there is it is all basically there is, when it comes to information, there is external information, public information, and there is internal information. right? Now, a lot of the time, bringing like a combining the external internal is very, very difficult. However, with like with AI, public and private information can easily be actually taken into account. And this is like don't forget that it is going even beyond just the private information in the sense of, for instance, your own financial statements, right? But it can also be, for instance, looking at your invoices and transactions as well. So there are a lot of informations that can actually help you to figure out whether it is whether the company is genuinely complying to the ESG criteria. Now, one thing that has escaped us for the longest time when it comes to these kind of things is what we've called sentimental analysis. This is not sentimental. Sorry, bad English. Sentiment analysis. That's what I meant. Sentiment analysis. What does it mean? What it means is this. In the past, if we were to give a machines to actually read things, okay, the problem here is, the best the machines can do is to actually pick up keywords, right? So we all know that, if there's an article that says like a child labor, chances are it has got a negative sentiment, right? But not everything as clear cut as child labor. For instance, minor pollution. What does it mean by minor pollution? So the question here is this: if the art even though we can, or machines can actually get all the articles out there, all the coverage out there, you still need to have the machines to actually make sense and say, hey, is it something that is positive, or is it something that is negative? The question, of course, is how do machines know? Machines don't know anything. They don't they don't know what good and bad is. Forget about whether it's negative or positive. But with sentiment analysis, and more importantly, plus the fact that we are providing humans a feedback, right? What what in the industry called annotation, and this is basically what Gen AI has ChatGPT has been doing all along, is basically using humans to actually just say, okay, how do you rate it, right? So imagine this: there is an article, the human said, it is positive, click positive, and then the next time when the machine says read something very similar, at least in terms of the wording, it's word choices, or at least in terms of the content, the machines will start to push its a probability towards the fact that it could actually be a positive one. And then let's say it is actually going to the humans again, and the humans say, yes, this is a good one. Machines actually gain confidence, and therefore they would over time learn how whether it is looking at the it is something that is positive or negative. Right now, very quickly, the last one is this: the output. All right. One thing that escaped me all the time and time again when it comes to technologies and technology vendors is this: they have probably got the some of these companies have got the best technologies, they have got the best engineering teams, software teams, programmers. What they often actually failed miserably with their business is the following: the output. Right? After all, it is the you need to actually cater to the users, because if the users are actually not using it, you can forget about no matter how good the information is actually coming coming your way, right? So being paying attention to dashboards, it has to be something that is useful. It has to be the UI, the user interface has to they must be actually working very, very, very well for the users. And time again, I see a lot of technology vendors, they actually fail to take these into account. Right now, I'm writing a book on AI right now, and on one of the chapters, I try to highlight all the problems that companies have got when it comes to implementing AI, and what we have I have found is the fact that companies time and time again, they're still not actually paying attention to the users, it is the users and not the technology that really actually get things to to go around. Give you an example very, very quickly, right? Lots of people in financial services. The one thing that I was in financial services once, but I saw the light and therefore become an academic. And one thing that we all use is spreadsheet. No one can actually say to me, Terence, stop using spreadsheet and start using something different. Okay, no one, no other, because I know how spreadsheet works. I can actually program. I can actually change things. I know how to sort things out. I know how to build all the functions. If you were anyone who is actually going in and say, guys, listen, from now on, you should stop using spreadsheets. This is the dashboard. It is not going to work. It is not going to work that easily when it comes to the adoption. You're much better off, therefore, using Gen AI to turn the output and feed it into the spreadsheets that they can actually use. So output, I believe, is just as important. Last thing I want to say is the following. All of these, as going back to what Farhan was saying, and I was saying before, and that is this. All of these is not a one-off, right? There is a one-off is expensive enough, traditionally, right? At least, or even possible before AI. But now with AI, it is not only we can actually do it one-off, but what we just as important is that we can actually, build a monitoring system that is happening on an ongoing basis, so that any news that actually picked up right by AI, by machines, it can immediately be fed processed and immediately be on the dashboard, and then immediately notifying the the users. I believe that, right, this is very, very valuable. The speed is of essence here. It's very, very valuable to banks, especially when these are banks that are actually lending money under the auspice of ESG. They need to know if there is something like a problem with one of the borrowers that not meeting the requirement anymore. Only in this way they can actually take actions fast and furious in order to avoid not just the reputational damage potentially, but also the government, the authorities will come down and actually issuing them a fine, right? There is banks there is basically no excuse for a bank not to be able to keep to actually allow this to happen. But how do banks do it before AI? Anyway, my time is up. I'm hoping that it is it is something that is useful. I'm gonna hand it all back to Lawrence right now. So thank you.
Thanks, Terence. Thank you ever so much. Really appreciate that. Really, really informative as always. So I guess my take from that is, the data is key, and the idiosyncrasies in the collection of data, especially in emerging markets, is the biggest challenge. But yeah, thank you ever so much for that. And Farhan, thanks to you for the initial presentation. I think that was insightful in terms of what's the direction of the GCC and the KSA market, and that players in that market need to start getting better prepared, because this sort of regulation is definitely going to come. What we can do now, we've got 4 minutes left. We can open to the floor if anybody has any questions. It'll have to be in the chat. So if you want to go into the chat and ask a question. Okay, we've got Scope 1. Can you give a definition of the emission Scope 1, 2, and 3, and which is the biggest challenge? Terence, that one for you?
That's a great question. I can't remember what exactly Scope 1 is, the true definition. But I believe that when I mentioned the fact that we were the financial services here in in the UK is the 8th largest largest country when it comes to pollution, right, in size. That is Scope 3. That is the biggest problem, because how do you keep track? It is impossible, right? Now, and at the same time, I think like if you're a bank, you're not supposed to be lending money to polluters, right? So, but how do you know? I'm assuming that you're not doing it knowingly, but how do you know whether you are actually lending it to like a company that has never really disclosed it, or only doing it after they have borrowed the money? So that is the that should be scope 3. I can't remember exactly scope 1 and 2. I think
yeah,
scope
so
1.
maybe for me, scope 1 is direct emissions that your company emits, and therefore it's
Yep.
easier to monitor.
Yep.
Scope 2 is the emissions that the energy that you buy, and
Yep.
how you measure that. And scope 3 is that value chain or supply chain, in terms of where your money as an investor goes into having an impact on
Right.
the emissions. And the scope 3 one, in our experience, is the difficult one, because how far do you go down that supply chain
Exactly.
to be able to calculate the kind of impact that your money and investment is having.
Correct.
And again, it comes down to a data question. But thank you for that. Farhan, I think we have a question for you. So this one is, how can financial institutions best leverage ESG trends to attract international investors?
Oh, well, at a very high level, I think the first is, having an ESG strategy and strengthening the framework and the compliance. Now, there are some compliance measures that are being taken, or regulators are enforcing. So strengthening on them. And then the second bit is having those sustainable investment products around them. Green bond we talked about, ESG compliant scoops is another one. Creating ESG focused funds would be another one. So once you create those products, and in parallel have enhanced ESG data with transparency, something that Terence was talking about. If there is no transparency, if it is self-reporting, there might be some question. So having products, having the data and transparency, and then it's all about going out and initially and floating those. But over time, and I'm talking a GCC, which is not known very well for ESG, as fundings are prioritized into new renewable projects or waste management, water conservation, et cetera, I believe the IMFs and the World Banks, et cetera, will also start putting in and partnering into such projects, which starts building that credibility. So that's at a high level. Another thing, which is the Islamic finance part, so Sharia compliant, and that is something that is something that some work has happened, because there are some Islamic compliant or Sharia compliant ESG principles. So if focusing on those, that hey, this is ESG, are these Sharia compliant, I believe the Islamic funding will also open up, which not only happens in GCC but also around a lot in Southeast Asia. But bottom line is transparency and the products which are ESG compliant.
Can I just add one more point? I promise you it will be like 30 seconds. So the biggest problem we've seen is clarity, transparency, and consistency. With AI, we can solve all of the, I believe that, we can mitigate a lot of these problems. I think Farhan's point is very important, especially, right, when you have to actually provide evidence and proofs that, certain companies are really the companies are really, doing the right thing with ESG. One thing that I should have mentioned, but I forgot, is the fact that, it's not, when it comes to the output part of AI, it is not just building a wonderfully useful dashboard. It is also about being able to churn out a report that can allow companies to keep on filing, right? The fact that it has been ESG compliance for so long, only by providing a paper trail of your ability to comply with ESG, that is the key to to leading ultimately to what Farhan was actually saying, being able to build your reputational your reputational gains out of this.
and improvements thereon. So in emerging markets, you're not going to get to the final end straight away. You're just going to gradually improve, and evidencing that is super important.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a journey.
Brilliant, guys. Thanks ever so much for your time and your efforts in creating the content there. Really, really appreciated. And we'll close the webinar there. Thanks again. Thank you everyone for attending.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Have a good one. Bye-bye. Take care. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.